welcome to Your Favourite Teacher's CPD. This is on planning effective remote learning. So I'm Charlene Shaw. I'm the Client Relationship Manager, or one of the Client Relationship Managers for Your Favourite Teacher. And over the last year, especially obviously with the pandemic and with lockdown and schools being closed, I've been working specifically with our clients on making sure that they're getting the most out of remote teaching and their students are getting the most out of remote learning. So hopefully today's session will give you a few kind of hints and tips on how to make it as good as it can be. So we're going to be going over responding to student needs, setting clear objectives for remote learning, achieving high engagement rates, and the importance of reflecting and evaluating. Even though that's normally most teachers' worst nightmares, it was when I was training to be a teacher anyway, and in my first couple of years of teaching. So let's get straight to it. So responding to student needs, I think this is huge at the moment with remote learning, because it really is kind of at the forefront of, it's at the forefront of what teachers do anyway, let alone having to do it remotely from home whilst the schools are shut. So lovely little quote there, love a quote. A great teacher is someone who can learn from their students, who can learn with them and learns for them. And I think that last bit, learning for the students, is the main thing at the moment, because we are in a situation where we're having to kind of think on our feet and really change the way we're used to teaching in order to kind of get the most out of our students during such a difficult time. So the first thing to remember before you even start planning for a remote lesson is that your audience, 9 times out of 10, is made of students that you know really well. Okay, so don't forget that. You know your students, whether you're teaching them from home or you're teaching them in the classroom. You know your students and you know them quite well, especially this kind of time in the year. You know, it's not September anymore. So you're already aware of their learning patterns, you're aware of their struggles, what they find easy, what they find difficult as well. So it is easier in that sense to create a lesson that kind of suits their needs. And I think with teachers being told you now have to kind of teach live lessons and teach remotely, panic sets in and that actually gets lost. You know your students, you know when they work well, and it's no different if they're at home. So you know that a Monday period 3, they are a lot more alert compared to a Friday period 6, for example. So use that to your advantage and plan your lessons to that advantage. So perhaps what you'd set for them on a Monday period 3 might be or will be completely different to what you set on a Friday period 6, because you know that by Friday, probably on a Thursday nowadays with homeschooling and stuff, that's when they start to kind of lose their focus and lose their attention span, and you find it more difficult to engage. So play to your strengths, and one of your main strengths is you know your classes well. But what if I don't know my class well enough? I know that as much as we say that we know our classes well, sometimes you have that class that you only see once a week, or perhaps they were added onto your timetable because of staffing issues and stuff like that, and you don't know them as well as perhaps you know your other classes. That's okay. It's just about adapting and dealing with that. So start by evaluating existing knowledge. Look at what topic you're kind of teaching and evaluate the existing knowledge of that topic, and then at least you'll kind of have an idea of what to kind of focus on when you're delivering these lessons, using things like quizzes, a recall activity such as a mind map, doing like fill in the gap exercises on a worksheet, things like that. That'll all help you to understand where your students are within a particular topic, but also it gives them a chance to kind of show you what they're comfortable with and what they're potentially struggling with as well. So I've got my notes next to me. So I've just jotted down kind of if you're using Google Classroom or Teams, stuff like that, you'll be able to do this with your classes in a live lesson, like creating a mind map or doing a quiz with them, and you'll be able to edit things on the screen in real time, so that you can give on the spot feedback. So if someone's kind of given some ideas and you like them, you can add them to your mind map straight away and it will come up on the screen in front of the student. If it's perhaps not quite what you had in mind, then you can kind of correct it straight away there and then, which I think is something, regardless of whether you know your class or you don't. These kind of exercises are really, really good for kind of testing their knowledge, a really good assessment for learning technique as well. So definitely use that to your advantage, especially if you don't know the class that well. It'll only take a couple of weeks and you'll kind of be there with them and understand a little bit about how they kind of work. I was going to say something else and it's completely gone from my mind, which is just standard me. So I'm going to move on, but if it comes back to me, I'll obviously share it with you guys as and when. So the next part is setting clear objectives for remote learning. And I think staying focused on what needs to be achieved is key right now, because like my little meme shows here, skipping class during lockdown is when the students have got their mics off and their camera off and you don't really know what they're doing. It depends what kind of rules are set in place by your school in terms of whether the students have to have their cameras on and off and stuff like that. But it is really hard to keep students engaged unless you've got clear objectives. So you need to think about what are the key skills that need to be covered over X amount of weeks. So if you're thinking about a whole half term, it's looking likely that we're in lockdown until Easter. So what are the key skills that need to be covered over X amount of weeks, for example? Then once you've kind of got that, and that could, the first point, that could be something that you do within your subject meetings and stuff like that. So as a faculty, what are the skills we're covering this half term? Okay, what would we normally cover in lesson in school on a normal week or a normal half term? Is that going to be slightly different because we're homeschooling? Probably. Okay, so maybe we cut that 5 key skills down to 3, for example. And then once you've got that, you're breaking it down into what needs to be achieved week by week. Okay. What can be achieved each lesson? So you start with the bigger picture and you kind of break it down from there. This is standard stuff that you already know what to do, but I feel from the conversations I've had with schools and with clients, this is something that teachers are kind of forgetting almost. They forget that they know that that's what we do, you know, that's what we do as teachers. We start with the bigger picture and we break it down and we work backwards. It's no different to kind of working remotely. So if you kind of break that down, obviously giving a little bit of leeway to the fact that you are teaching remotely, students aren't going to be as engaged as they would be in the classroom. It's going to be harder to kind of keep them engaged on the camera. You can kind of edit and mold your lessons based on the really important things that they need to learn. So as I said, you might learn 5 key skills over a half term. When you're actually in school, you might need to break that down to 3. Okay, and how, you know, you might spend 2 weeks on each skill, for example, if you're over a 6-week half term period. So setting those clear objectives and actually sharing them with your classes, that's essential to staying focused and keeping them on track as well. And also learning not to worry if you don't end up getting it all done in one lesson. So, you know, you've planned this amazing online lesson that should be really engaging, but it's not working because your mic's gone or there's some sort of technical issue or half the class haven't turned up. That's not your fault. Don't worry, it's fine. You know, it's okay. And I think that's what teachers need to remind themselves. It's okay. You can only do as much as you can do. So if you've got those clear objectives and perhaps you don't hit them by the end of the week, okay, fine, do it next week. Okay, no one's going to especially in today's climate, no one's going to really, you know, have a massive go at you if you don't get it all done, because it's hard. It is hard to get that done. So I would say, sorry, I'm just checking my notes to make sure that I've got everything down, but definitely sharing those objectives with the class. So by the end of this week, we're going to have learnt this, this and this. Again, you do that in a normal week anyway. At the start of each live lesson, you might want to kind of quickly recap as your starter activity what the objectives were, how comfortable the class seemed with each objective, for example. That's what I was going to say on the last slide. So some students, and again, you've been teaching live lessons for a while now, you should know which students are kind of a little bit shy, whether that's in school or on a live lesson as well. And it could be that they're the most outgoing, confident person in school, but they're a lot shyer because they're working or learning from home, and they've got their parents kind of breathing down their necks and stuff like that as well. So utilize the chat function as much as possible, whether it's Zoom, Teams, Google Classroom, however you're doing it. There will be a function where the student can directly send you a message without it kind of popping up to the whole class. And I know that's not the best thing, because you know, sometimes you might have to sift through loads of messages coming from loads of different students. I know on Zoom that it all just comes up in one chat box, so you'll be able to see who's sent you a message and whether they've sent it to the whole group or if they've sent it privately to you. And I think that's a good function. I'm not too sure whether that's the same on Teams and Google Classroom, but utilize that chat box and make it clear that it's okay for students to use that chat box if they need to, if they don't feel confident enough to kind of unmute their mic and talk vocally, so that the whole class can hear. It's a really, really easy way to kind of keep them engaged and getting them focused on what they achieve. So in this sense, sharing those objectives and using that as your starter activity twice in the week or 3 times in the week. Okay, where are we with the objectives? How do you feel about the objectives? Some students might be able to chat away and tell you exactly how they feel about the objectives. Other students might feel comfortable just sending a quick message in that chat function. Use it to your advantage. Next slide. So, but lovely little arrows. So they all link in. Okay, so as I said, you're doing the bigger picture and you're kind of breaking down, and then you can go back to the bigger picture by, love a bit of hand action there. So you can go back to the start of your kind of bigger picture at the end of the half term as well. Okay, so these are just some examples of how you can be setting these clear objectives. So I know that lesson planning is, I was about to say a teacher's worst nightmare. It was my worst nightmare. I hated the long lesson plans that you'd have to produce. And I know that Ofsted don't even really ask for a lesson plan anymore. Some schools still expect you to do them. Okay, but whatever your school policy or however you plan, have something written down, whether that's on your laptop or on a piece of paper. I personally prefer writing things down in notebooks, but however you feel comfortable. Things like the 5-minute lesson plan. Okay, so it's an old but gold, I like to say. That was introduced to me when I first started training to be a teacher 7 years ago. Things that kind of focus more on teacher well-being, I think, are amazing. So the Happy Teacher Planner or the Happy Teacher Pad, really, really good to kind of jot down what you're doing, but also keep a reflection of how you're feeling throughout the week. What's high priority? What do you need to do? What were your happy moments, to kind of keep morale high, and sharing that with your class if it's something to do with a particular class, or sharing it with your faculty. But having something written down rather than kind of just winging it. And I know that sometimes as teachers we do wing it, and those happen to be the best lessons, but 9 times out of 10 you're going to have a clear plan in place, especially whilst teaching remotely, so that you know what you're hoping to achieve by the end of that week. So little things like this can really, really help as well. Also sharing them again with your students. So I like this distance learning plan. It's got a maths, a reading and a writing. So it's geared, I think that one's geared more towards primary school, but you can change it depending on what topic you're doing within secondary school. But giving that breakdown and having it as a checklist that you can share with your students at the start of the week, so that they can kind of tick it off, or they can traffic light how they feel about it, and perhaps take a picture and send it to you on Teams, or send it in on Google Classroom or by email. Those little things really, really help not just you to understand where your students are, but also the students know where they're supposed to be, and they end up not getting as lost as they might do without that kind of aid in front of them. Moving on, she says. So achieving high engagement rates, I think, again, this is probably something that is the most worrisome in terms of making sure that your students are happy with it. So having a clear and consistent structure really, really helps. So keeping a schedule dependent on your school policy. So do all lessons need to be live, for example? So things like that. So keep a schedule so your students know what lessons are what. So lessons 1, 3 and 5 of the week are all going to be live lessons. Lessons 2 and 4 are going to be like one reading lesson and one independent research lesson, for example. Follow the school day as if you're physically there. So that means getting up, making your coffee, having a staff room, just kind of mimicking the school day as much as possible really, really helps with achieving high engagement rates. So for example, if a student's trying to get hold of you between 12 and 1, but that's normally your lunch break, take it as your lunch break. Okay, I know as teachers, and again, everyone's guilty of it, of sitting in the staff room and the students knock on the door and they try and like get your attention. Just be really, really clear about that, because not only are you in a completely different environment where you're teaching remotely, but also you're teaching 9 times out of 10 from your home. This is your private space, so keep it as private as you can. Okay, so if you're on your lunch break, it's not a chance for students to send you emails or for you to be checking your emails. Actually take it as a lunch break. It's probably easier to do working remotely than it is being actually in school, where you're more inclined to do that. I think I've already said this, create an overview or checklist to be shared with your students at the start of every week. So that kind of goes hand in hand with your objectives and stuff like that, making sure that you've got a clear idea of what objectives you plan on getting on achieving that week, but sharing that with the students so that they can kind of join in with that as well. So I'm just making sure that I'm not missing anything. So I've kind of jotted down about making your objective or overview editable, so you can do it live in the lesson as well, so the students can see. Make sure you've got somewhere that stores all your resources. So like I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I'll share it after the CPD as part of our resources that we share, but a way of kind of having every resource that's used within a week on one piece of paper or on one document, so that students can kind of access that and link back to previous lessons if they need to. Things like that are easily adaptable to whatever your school's learning management system is. So whether you're using Teams or Google Classroom or Zoom, whatever you're using, having that kind of editable hyperlinked document, you'll be able to share that in whatever way you need to. And that should be a lot easier this time round. Don't forget, we're nearly a year into lockdown. I can't believe I'm saying that. We're nearly a year into lockdown. So it should be easier now, because all of those initial kinks that were kind of we were up against as teachers are being ironed out, or they have been ironed out, and schools are more aware of what they need to be providing for parents, for students. So you should be able to kind of get that done quite easily as well. So again, achieving high engagement rates, we're still on that one. Visuals, visuals, visuals. So humans tend to remember 80% of what they see. I can't see. 20% of what they read and 10% of what they hear. Sorry, my face was covering it. So little things like replacing written instructions with videos if you've got time to do a quick video, or even a quick like voice note, voice recording explaining what you need to do, but preferably an actual visual video rather than written instructions. Find something relevant online to fill the first 10 minutes. So if you've got a learning platform that your school uses like YFT or GCSE Pod, using one of those videos to fill that time, so it's not just you on camera draining your energy, and then summarizing in bullet points with what needs to be done. So you've got like a summary video of the Jekyll and Hyde plot, and then underneath, based on that video, you need to create a mind map, or you need to, you know, rewrite in your own words what the plot is, or something like that, to kind of give students a visual of what they're looking for. And then a couple of bullet points so that you're not over talking. I think that's on my next slide anyway. Online whiteboards or something like Trello, so that you can quickly write things down during live lessons. Students have something to refer back to. So I really like a Trello board personally. Again, I'll send that out with the resources pack after the CPD. But yeah, having a kind of Trello board where you've got different ideas on different boards, and students can kind of have a look at it, and you can lock it and keep it so that they can't edit it, or you can have it open so that they can add to it as they go along as well. If a lesson is not live, consider adding a voiceover to your presentations. I know that some schools are being told they need to do that, so they have to do a voiceover to go with their PowerPoint slide, for example. Doing that to explain what needs to be done rather than loads of writing on that PowerPoint slide to read through. Kind of like the slide in front of you, there's a lot of writing on that one. But if you've got the kind of basic bullet points of what needs to be done, and you're explaining on top of that, that will be a lot easier for students to kind of comprehend and understand, compared to trying to read through lots of instructions. Again, it links back to one of the first things I said, you know your students. Okay, so if you've got a top set, for example, they might find it easy to read through a big long list of instructions. But if you've got a lower set, they might find that hard to kind of get through the instructions and understand what is being asked of them. So again, use that strength and kind of make sure you're able to explain in a different way if they don't get it. And I would highly recommend a voiceover or a quick summary video of what's being asked if it's not live. Okay. Oh, I've got some bullet points. A few ways to incorporate visuals into your lessons. So replace written instructions with videos. I've already said that. Record yourself talking rather than writing instructions out in a document. If that's too time consuming, so recording yourself to share with your class, then find something relevant online. So look on things like Your Favourite Teacher, look at YouTube, Google videos, stuff like that, because you might find something that actually explains it in an easier way than you might do. Also, things like the flipped classroom. I am a huge fan of the flipped classroom. I first saw it, 2014, maybe 2015. I went on an educational research trip to Sweden, and they raved about the flipped classroom, and it worked really well. So it works well if you have access to online learning platforms, so YFT, Sam Learning, GCSE Pod, something like that. It works really well if your school has a subscription to something like that. And then it allows you to kind of use your time wisely, because it's very valuable, especially when you're teaching remotely and you're teaching live lessons, and it helps to support independent learning as well. So the idea of the flipped classroom, if you don't already know, so when they're not in your lesson, out of class, they prepare to participate in those class activities. So you'll have a few activities planned, and rather than in a normal classroom, you'd maybe get them to watch a 10 or 15-minute video clip, or you might get them to read the chapter of a book, or listen to the audio book of it, something like that. You get them to do that before your lessons. That's their homework. So their homework is to read chapter 8, or listen to the audio book, or watch the video of so-and-so. Then during your lesson, you can consolidate that understanding a lot easier, because you're not spending your time, your valuable time, in a live lesson environment where you're recording. You're not spending that time just sticking a video on. You're actually spending that time engaging with the students, getting them to kind of build on the knowledge they've learned from the video or they've learned from the chapter, and doing little activities and quizzes and A4L moments that you're able to kind of do more of in that time. So it's just using your time wisely. It is very, very easy, especially when you're teaching live lessons, to be like, oh, I've got a 50-minute live lesson to do, or 25 minutes they can watch a video, then I've only got to worry about the other 25 minutes. Actually, no, get them to do that as their homework, and then you spend the time actually working with them, building on that knowledge, doing those activities that they can then kind of carry on extending, or they can kind of research further into after the lesson and send in to you. It's a better use of your time if you're teaching live lessons. Even if you're not teaching live lessons, it's better to kind of save that stuff as their homework, because what would a student rather, watch a 20-minute video for their homework, or be expected to write an essay with no support for their homework? I know it with my student hat on, I know what I would prefer. And I know that obviously students do need to get to a point where they're obviously able to write an essay independently, especially for GCSE English. They'll need to do that for their exams, if there ever will be exams again within the next couple of years. But right now, what they need is their support from their teacher within that live lesson. So it is easy to set, 25 minutes of my live lesson will be watching a video. But if you get them to do that for their homework, and then you build on that knowledge in the lesson, it will kind of help to achieve the high engagement rates. The students will be more engaged as well, because they'll know that they need to they really need to kind of give it their all, and they've only got 50 minutes with their teacher, and they should kind of use that to the best of their ability. It should hopefully get the lesson to A, go quicker, and B, get the students to engage a lot more within that as well. So yeah, the main things that you'd be doing with that flipped classroom, so watching videos, reading documents or chapters from books or whatever, listening to podcasts is a really, really good one as their homework, and then they do the homework part in class. Okay, so they are answering the questions, they're doing the activities in lesson with you guiding them as well. And you still get your respite, because an activity you put up could take them 10-15 minutes, and that's where you've got 10-15 minutes not to just sit and chill, because they will be kind of popping up and asking you questions and on the chat and stuff, but it means that you're not talking for the whole 50-minute lesson, for example. They still should be doing some work as well. Something I need to work on, reduce teacher talk. So when your teacher won't stop talking, I love that meme. Reduce teacher talk. So teachers love to fill silence. I love to fill silence, as you're probably aware from this CPD. Talk less and get the students to do more. Okay, so if you usually set long tasks with lots of explanation building up to it, break it into 3 smaller tasks. So I would say, it's very unlikely that in a live lesson you're going to get all of your students to sit for half an hour in silence and write a whole big sorry, a whole big essay response. But maybe if you break that up, okay, so 10 minutes working on your introduction, or 10 minutes working on questions 1 through 3. I want you to do this, this and this. Okay, go. Give them 10 minutes. Then you give them another verbal task. Then they do the next bit. Breaking it up into smaller chunks rather than expecting students sitting at home to just sit for half an hour. At this point, they'll probably go on mute. They'll probably turn their camera off, and they're, you know, watching Netflix when they should be doing their work, for example. But if you turn it into 3 smaller chunks, or however many smaller chunks, it will kind of help keep them on track. Again, little things that you would do normally in a lesson. It's just, I think teachers have forgotten that they can still be as normal as possible on a live lesson, using a visual timer like you would in a normal face-to-face lesson. Oh my God, I'm a huge fan of visual timers. I always had a visual timer going with all of my classes to keep them on track. It's no different if you're doing it now. Okay, use those kind of visual aids that you would use as if you're actually delivering a lesson face to face. And then the last bit, so reflect, evaluate and get feedback. Okay, I know that this is probably the most gruesome part of teaching. It was for me anyway. I hated the feedback bit and having to kind of write down what my thoughts on every lesson. And I'm definitely not asking everyone to start doing that as part of their live lesson process, because who has time for that right now during a pandemic? But you do need to reflect, and you do need to ask for feedback. So you need to think about what worked best, what could be brilliant if you made a few tweaks, and what will never ever happen again in a live lesson. And it's just about kind of jotting down a quick reflection or just thinking about it. But how did the students find it? Okay, so you're trying to engage students remotely whilst you're trying to navigate a pandemic as well. So how are you going to be able to do that and give your students the best if you aren't asking them how they found it, even if it is brutal? And we all know that students, and teenagers in particular, are very brutal, and they'll be very, very honest. But it's essential to improve the learning environment of your students. The more you reflect, the more successful you'll be at getting the learning environment right. I'm a huge, huge believer of that. Just ask them, how did you find that lesson? What activity did you like? What didn't you like? What was boring? What could make it better? I know most students go, I don't know. And the kind of ownership falls back on you. But if you think that, you know, doing a certain activity 3 times a week has been really, really successful, and actually every student has been snoring their head off for that activity 3 times in the week, but actually if you'd have just asked after the second lesson, you could have saved time trying to get them engaged when they weren't at all, for example. So I can't stress this enough. Make sure you're reflecting and evaluating during this time. It is obviously a difficult time to be able to kind of navigate, but if you're trying your best and you're using some time in your day to reflect and to evaluate and jot a few things that went well and what went well, and even better if you're taking the time to do that, hopefully it will help to improve not only your own live lessons, but it will improve it for the students as well, and it will help to improve that learning environment, and it will help to get it right. So in today's session, as a quick recap, we've looked at responding to student needs, setting clear objectives, achieving high engagement rates, and the importance of reflecting and evaluating. I hope you found that useful. I feel like I've really, really banged on about quite a lot. So feel free to kind of go back and kind of rewatch and stuff like that. But I hope it's helped. If you need anything, just drop us an email, info@yourfavouriteteacher.com, Charlene@yourfavouriteteacher.com. I don't mind if you send me an email. We will send out this PowerPoint so that you can kind of go back through it, and I will be sending out a resources pack as well with just a few things that I think would be helpful whilst we're still teaching remotely. So I'm Charlene Shaw with Your Favourite Teacher. Thanks for watching this CPD session.